Hey guys, it's Chris. From famous places of long ago to eerie towns abandoned slowly. Join me as I reveal 9 famous abandoned towns you can actually visit. Number 9. Bodie, California. There are many events in the world that unintentionally created ghost towns, and one of the biggest such events for the United States was that of the gold rush of 1849. Many people flocked to California from all over for a chance to try and strike it rich in gold. Then, once the gold was gone, people left the area in droves. And one town that got left in the dust was Bodie, California. During the point of 1849, Bodie was still only a very small town, as there hadn't been much gold there at all. But people did still live there. However, in 1876, everything changed. A major streak of gold was discovered in the area, and the gold rush had come to Bodie as a result. At the peak of its popularity, Bodie, California had over 10,000 people in it, a vast majority of whom were trying to get gold, and the gold itself helped the place expand massively. However, like many gold towns, by the 19th century all the gold was gone, and the town went into decline. Eventually, in 1962, the town of Bodie was turned into a historical park, one that you can go and visit, and you can see for yourself what the gold rush did to small towns like this one once upon a time. Number 8. Hashima Island, Japan. Despite what people think, Japan is not just one unified landmass of a country. They have several islands off their coast that they've colonized over the years, one of which is now abandoned and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. That's Hashima Island. Relative to Japan, it's not that far away. It's only about 9 miles off Nagasaki, and during a massive coal boom, the island was filled with people, buildings, and more. But it wasn't just coal mines, it was underwater coal mines, and it helped fuel the industrialization of Japan at the time. From about 1887 to 1974, the island was full of inhabitants. But then the mines started to dry up, and Japan decided to cut their losses and close the mines down. With the main source of industry now gone, the people of the island departed, leaving the buildings, schools, hospitals, and more just laying there. However, this turned out to be a blessing. For since it was an island, there was no reason to go there outside of curiosity, and the place remained virtually untouched for 3 decades. This eventually led it to be a tourist attraction, and then a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2015. It's also been featured in certain movies due to its somewhat haunting look. Number 7. Cerro Gordo, California. It wasn't just gold that was found in California in the 1800s. In the little town of Cerro Gordo, California, a man named Pablo Flores shocked many when he found a streak of silver in the nearby mountain areas and started to mine and smelt them. And he made a good profit as a result. But even without modern technology, word began to spread about what Flores had found. So many people descended upon the area of Cerro Gordo, even opening up a massive mine to help flesh it all out. Interestingly enough, as they did, they found not just silver, but lead and ore, which was nearly as valuable as silver. So the town of Cerro Gordo prospered greatly for this time. This all started in 1865, but things took a turn not so long after that. A lot of legal battles started happening in the town, including many debates happening over who owned the town of Cerro Gordo. At this point in time, the mines were starting to dry up, and the price of lead and ore were going down. All these factors led to the town being abandoned by the late 1870s, but it's now a popular tourist attraction that you can visit. And now for number 6, but first, be sure to subscribe to World List and let us know if you visited any of these places. Number 6, Keycode, Alaska. Nowadays, Keycode, Alaska is a town that's within a national park called Wrangell St. Ellis, which just so happens to be the biggest national park in all of the United States. In fact, it's so big that it's larger than Switzerland in terms of area. At one time, though, in the early 1900s, some unsuspecting prospectors realized the place was a boon for copper. After many investigations, it was dubbed one of the richest concentrations of copper ever seen. So naturally, a boomtown was built. There were even investors in the town such as J.P. Morgan. Also, his company could get a cut of the copper, and that turned out to be a very wise investment. For over $200 million worth of copper ore was found within the area itself. This naturally lent the town the money it needed to expand. However, when the ore dried up in the 1930s, the mine was shut down, and the decade started to take a serious toll on the town. Eventually, the National Park Service bought it in 1998 and made it a place that tourists can visit and explore. Number 5. Glen Rio, New Mexico and Texas. The idea of a road making a place a ghost town may sound odd, but when a town used to bank on the popularity of Route 66, one of the most famous roads ever, you start to understand what happened. At one time, Route 66 was the popular way to get from New Mexico to Texas or vice versa. It was a long stretch at times though, so towns like Glen Rio were the oasis in the deserts that people could go to for gas, food, drinks, and more. During the prime of Route 66, Glen Rio was a very prosperous town. And then the I-40 road came along, and it offered a somewhat better route for motorists. So because of this, Glen Rio saw less and less traffic until eventually it was abandoned. The town is now listed as a historical place, and you can see many of the things that attracted people there back in the day, including motels, diners, and even some classic cars. You'll even see the signs that welcomed motorists to the area. And for those of us who watch Pixar films, you'll realize that this was part of the plot for the movie Cars. Number 4. Carico, Italy. Depending on what you view film-wise, you'll likely recognize Carico, Italy in movies like The Passion of the Christ and King David. The town itself is built into a summit and was done so for defensive reasons. Because of this, the town is quite unique in its looks. There's some debate as to when the place was first settled. Tombs from as far back as the 8th century BC suggest that people have lived there for a really long time, and then the Greeks came in and colonized it even more. The city has always had an interesting history, including growing so large it could have districts and even rebellions via certain parties. But in the 1900s, everything fell apart quite literally. First, in the 1920s, a major immigration movement in Europe to America happened, and Carico was heavily affected then. But that wasn't all. Eventually, a series of natural disasters completely wiped out the town in parts, and it was abandoned after that. Despite this, people continue to go back there and visit. There are even societies created by the descendants to honor the culture and heritage of the city. Number 3. Alcatraz, California. While not a town per se, the island known as Alcatraz most definitely has played an interesting role in the history of the United States. Mainly because the island off the coast of San Francisco was home to one of the most famous prisons in the history of the world. Alcatraz was a maximum security prison, meant to house the worst of the worst. And the island location was meant to enforce that there was no way out of the prison. Because even if you broke out of your cage and the main building, you'd have to swim across the ocean to get to somewhere. And if you didn't know the tides of the bay, you'd be swept out into the ocean and probably die there. What's forgotten at times is that Alcatraz had multiple purposes over the time, including being a military base, a lighthouse for ships, and later on in life, an art exhibit for various people. In terms of the prison, though, they housed legends like Al Capone and more. But eventually, the setting was proven too costly to maintain, and the prison itself was breaking down. So the prison was closed, and many decades later, it was opened up for tours. Now, officially, no one ever escaped Alcatraz. Unofficially, though, there may have been 3 who were able to, and there are many who think that the spirits of the prisoners still remain on the island. Number 2. Cahaba, Alabama. The city of Cahaba, which has also been called the city of Cahaba over the years, is a very important city in the history of the state, mainly because it was this town that was the first capital of Alabama. And because of this, the place was said to have a bright future. However, there was a serious problem, and it wasn't the people, it was the location of the town itself. It was near 2 major rivers in Alabama, which meant it was prone to floods and very bad ones. Due to this, in 1826, the town lost its capital status. However, over the years, Cahaba fought back and got new prominence for being both a cotton town and a prison town for Union soldiers during the Civil War. This led to it being a popular town for freed slaves once the battles ended. Eventually, though, the floods came back and washed many things out, including the people. The town was eventually abandoned, and now stands as Alabama's most famous ghost town. It's also an archaeological park that you can go to and observe the history of the remaining buildings. Number 1. Pripyat, Ukraine. The Chernobyl disaster left its mark on the world when it had a failure back in 1986. But without a doubt, the biggest casualty of the entire region was that of Pripyat in the Ukraine. At the time, Pripyat was a booming city, even having an amusement park in it because of the amount of people there. When the evacuation notice came, almost 50,000 people from the area had to be pulled out because of the outpouring of radiation from the nuclear reactor. And even though many got out fine, many more were sick because of the radiation, and others died due to exposure. Due to the immediate impact of the area, the town had to be warded off to ensure no one returned. Over the many years since, the town has slowly started to open up, and there are even tours that can be done in the safe zones of the area. Still, many wonder if the place will ever truly be livable again because of the events that happened there and what nature has done to the place since. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these abandoned places you can actually visit? Have you ever been to one of these places before? Would you like to go to one of these towns and maybe check it out? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time on World List.